Hey everyone, welcome to the start of another project reading vlog. So in this reading vlog, I'm going to be reading some hyped romantasy books that I am feeling a little bit skeptical about. They're ones that I have either had recommended to me or that I just hear about constantly. And I am both curious, but like honestly skeptical because romantasy has just been a bit of a loose cannon, like wild card, kind of disappointing subgenre, and one where I genuinely thought that I would like. So in this vlog, I'm gonna be trying out 3 romantasy books: Heartless Hunter, Quicksilver, and To Poison a King, to see if I can find some romantasy books that actually work for me. In addition to that, I am also hopefully going to be taking you around the city to try to find some Festivalsbala this year, so to try to not find them because they're everywhere, but to taste test some Festivalsbala in town. So Festival in Denmark is the holiday that they celebrate right before Lent starts, or Lent begins. It's essentially their version of Mardi Gras. I'm not going to get into all of the details, but it has kind of become this like pastry extravaganza. All of the pastries in town like come up with wild interpretations of these Festivalsbala with like creams and different flavors and all of the things, and I have not had a single one so far yet. And my Festival is coming up, and that is when they stop selling them. So I have to get around town, try out some Festivalsbala, see which ones I like this year, and read some hyped romantasy books to see which ones I might actually like. Hopefully at least one. Hopefully at least one of these 3 books really works for me. So let's talk about the 3 books I'm going to be reading in this vlog. The first of which is Heartless Hunter. Everybody was talking about this book last year, and I feel like I hesitated to pick it up because it is technically young adult, which has not really been working for me the last couple of years. So I have been a little bit hesitant to pick this up because of that. But a couple people recently who I would say I think I'm more likely to get on, like to have this similar romantasy kind of tastes to, have been really, have actually really enjoyed it. So it's back on the list, it's back on the TBR. It is, in fact, actually I just got like an audio copy, so that's the one that we're gonna start with. And all I know about this is that it is a witch and a witch hunter. Our main character is a witch, but she's a witch in hiding, like she's secretly a witch, and she is trying to save other witches and like escape them, like get them out of this country and to save them in this like persona as the Crimson Moth. And she wants to cozy up to the captain of the people who are like responsible for hunting the witches down in order to get more information to like help try to save more witches. And then he apparently is starting to suspect this girl. He's now trying to court her in order to get close to her to figure out if she is the Crimson Moth. Witch and witch hunter is like not necessarily my thing, so I feel like that's like something that you can't really get over, but we'll see how they do it in this book. Let's talk about book number 2 that I'm going to be reading, and that is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Again, everybody talked about this book last year. It is on my Kindle Unlimited TBR. This is a book that's like crazy. I feel like I saw it on so many people's end of the year favorites, but I also have seen a lot of people be like, this sucked. I really hated this. Quicksilver was also recommended to me by my friend Maria from Maria Might Read That, so a little bit higher odds of liking that there. And I have heard like generally rave things. I think this has like a 4.42 average on Goodreads. So I think people are liking it, but people also like, I don't know, other romantasy books that don't work for me. So I am skeptical. So all I know about this one is that originally it is set in like a desert fantasy scape. However, our main character is like a thief, and when she gets caught, she accidentally opens up a portal to a fae world, of course, and it's like snow and ice, and so like I will admit that I like that contrast, while I simultaneously dislike the fact that she discovers a portal to a fae world. Where she winds up getting into this like agreement with this Kingfisher guy, I think is his name. I've heard people say like nasty things about Kingfisher, our main hero here. So that is all I know about it. Fae, portal, desert meets icy snowscape, everybody really, really loves it, and it's on my Kindle TBR, so I want to get those intentional reading check marks for myself and try this out and see if it is actually going to work for me, or if I will be one of the few who dislikes it. We'll see. The last one here is one that was also personally recommended to me by Maria, and this is To Poison a King. It is also on my Kindle Unlimited TBR. Now, when Maria made this recommendation to me, she said this is the one that feels a little bit like, or that reminded her of Daughter of the Forest, which is a really interesting comp for me personally, as that's my favorite book of all time. So what I know about this one is that it is a healer. So that is definitely Daughter of the Forest vibes, main character healer, who is asked or like embroiled into a plot to, rather than like heal the king, is asked to poison the king, but it doesn't work. And she then has to like help him out, and they grow close over time. I see that it says here, a journey spanning years and continents, which is actually really interesting. If this like spans quite a long time, I would be more on board with that as like a slow burn romance perhaps, or like slow in time and rather like very, very short timelines, which I have a really big problem with romance books. And this is an interesting one because I think it is like a standalone but set within a world where the author wants to continue writing more stories within the world. So that could be really nice. It'd be like a nice complete feeling. But if I really enjoy the writing, the author's writing, her storytelling, and the world, maybe there will be more to come back to later. So again, some romantasy, feeling a little bit skeptical, but I would really, really love to find some hits in this subgenre. So let's crack into it. It's the next day, and I am 60% of the way into Heartless Hunter. So suffice it to say, it's actually going pretty well. We're going to ignore this glow-in-the-dark situation down here because I'm having a little bit of trouble like not touching it constantly. So things have deteriorated rapidly in that regards, but the book is actually going really well. I am really enjoying it. I think that there is enough that is like different and new, at least for me. As I said, like I never read Serpent and Dove, so there's at least enough that is new for me that I am on board. I think that the characters are charactering. I think the characterization is really good here. Generally, like I can follow along with why they are making the decisions that they're making. And I think that they're doing a good job of being like, we're not so fallen into love with the other person at this point that we have forgotten each of their main goals in this fake courtship, or like pretend courtship, this courtship of chicken almost, that they're playing with each other. That they're not like, still their internal dialogue is, how do I convince this other person that I'm for real, that I'm on board with this courting, and like what would I do or say that would convince the other person that this is real? How if this was real, how would it be real? And sure, there are like starting to be like tingling of like real feelings or like genuine interest in the other person, but they're still doing a really good job of like, what can I say that is true enough or that isn't too close to giving myself away that would convince this person that this situation is real? And I think that I enjoy that we're being like true to the story internally and we're not so caught up in emotions. And sure, there's like still a lot to go, right? We're in the second half of this book. And then because they are having to convince the other person that they are not the Crimson Moth in her case, or that he's not just out to catch her, they're putting themselves in situations not that creates romantic tension, which I think is the way that these situations often go, where it's like, oh, we're gonna share one bed, or forced to dance together, or get really close to each other. It's more that they are being put in situations where they have to be a little bit vulnerable with each other. And that is actually what's forcing the intimacy more so than anything else. So I'm really appreciating it from that perspective, because I feel like it could so easily go the angsty other way. And it's doing a good job of being real, that they're making the decisions that they're making for the real reasons, even though they're like, is there like a little bit of interest here, maybe? And that it is still leading to
them interacting in ways that makes them be more vulnerable with each other. So that is actually going really, really well. An element that I was not aware of, that I don't feel like I heard that many people talk about, and again, like I haven't gotten out of my way to listen to reviews, but I haven't heard anyone bring up the fact that this is a best friend's big brother situation, and that the best friend is in fact also a guy who is very clearly in love with her. So that is a dynamic that I think that some people would want to know about ahead of time, because I feel like that's a dynamic that some people will not appreciate, and we don't know how it's going to fall out. And I think Big Brother here, our love interest, Gideon, is very aware of that situation. So that is a dynamic that I was not aware of. It's not my favorite thing ever, but it doesn't ruin it for me. One issue though, if you know that a book has a crazy reveal at the ending, or like an ending that surprises everybody, you can't help but be a little bit more tuned into phrases that otherwise would seem innocuous. I tried to think of an example of how to say it that wasn't too close to the situation that I read that would give it away for other people. But because I know that there's like crazy reveals, it almost like keeps you on like a heightened guard to read into things that I think would otherwise just slip away as random facts. But with this in mind, you're kind of like, that was unnecessary to include, and that makes me think this and this and this, and actually I have convinced myself that I know what a significant amount of the reveals are. Like at this, there could be more, but I am pretty certain. Like I would say like 90, I'm 99% sure of one element, and I'm like 95% sure of an additional element. So that I feel like has actually suddenly, I feel like I realized that in like the 50 to 60% mark, and I feel like that has simultaneously cut and heightened the tension for my reading experience. Cut it in the sense of like, oh, well, like I know what happens and it won't be revealed. Because I'm like I guess I don't know what will happen plot-wise, but I think that I know what a really, really dramatic reveal is going to be. Because it's significant. This if something is a fact, that's significant. But then also now I'm stressed because I don't think our main characters see what has happened, and that makes me worried for them. I hope that didn't give it away. What I mean by like reading into the phrases that otherwise would seem innocuous is like, so for example, part of the description of this character is like, they wear red all the time, but red really doesn't suit them. And like, you maybe like wouldn't think anything of that, but if that information seems generally like kind of out of the blue when it was like included, and it's like, that doesn't really need to be said. And if that was the case, like why would that be significant? And then that leads to something that could like very, very, for whatever reason, the color red like tells you something, could theoretically tell you something really significant about that character. It's like that situation where it's like something that like otherwise could just be innocuous, but because you're aware that there's a secret, you're like, well, that didn't need to be included. And if that's included, maybe it's important. And if it's important, that could mean this other thing. And so like now I'm certain that I know the reveal. So we'll see if I'm correct. I'll let you know, and I'm gonna keep reading. But so far, as I said, surprisingly on board with this book, really enjoying it, and I don't even care that it's YA. So that's a positive.
So I finished Heartless Hunter, and I actually really liked it. I am super surprised. I would not have guessed that the YA romantasy book would, of all of the hyped romantasy that there is, I would never in a million years, based on my reading the past couple years, have guessed that would be the one that would work for me. But actually, I really enjoyed it. I think that there are some younger elements, I guess, to it, but honestly, I don't even really, like, sometimes you read a book and you're like, I don't really know what makes this YA versus any other book than just like the age of the characters being like 18 and 20. You know, like there are also adult books with main characters of that age, so I didn't really feel like the tone was that overall young. It wasn't excessively explicit. It was a little bit
suggestive and explicit, but honestly, like, I think I saw somebody else compare it to the first ACOTAR book, like just that first one, and I would agree. I did, however, guess the thing. There was a crazy element to the ending that was a surprising choice, but the big reveal is 100% what I thought it would be, like what I guessed it was. So I don't know if that was something that everybody saw or nobody saw or something that some people saw. Let me know. But I did pick up on a pretty big twisty reveal element by about the 40% mark based on like a small innocuous line that I read into because I knew that there was a big twisty reveal coming. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate element to like knowing that there is a big twisty reveal-y ending that everybody is really like whoo shocked about kind of when people are talking about this book. I didn't say much about the world last time, so we're in a world that definitely makes me think of like I mean, I always use post-revolution Russia as like the example here, but obviously this type of thing has taken place other times and worlds where we went from something that was led by a particular class of people, and this one, like the witches, there was 3 witch sisters, and they were overthrown, and the post that situation is just like everybody that has this noble blood, or in this case witch blood, we're just gonna completely eviscerate. And that the new politics, although it didn't focus a ton on this was it was not the focus of the book compared to something like Fireborn, where like the new government and the cracks in the foundation of like what has come after that's the focus of Fireborn. This, it was not the focus, but it definitely looks closer to like post-revolution Russia, like early communist Russia, where they call each other citizen and they take away some personal liberties in order for the greater good in times of emergency, like all of that classic rhetoric. But again, it was a very small minor part of it. It was more just like the hunting and killing of these witches because they simply have that blood. That was kind of the comparison there, with the comparison being the noble blood in other places or in other times in our actual history. There were some things in terms of world building that I really liked. There were some things in terms of world building in terms of like decorum and etiquette and sort of like the general like vibe of class and etiquette, but then some dresses and some like wardrobe choices, I was like, do those things correspond in the same world? But again, like I don't really care that much to make that critique. It could bother some people though. But overall, I liked the 2 main characters. I felt like their internal driving forces tracked really well. I feel like it influenced their choices in like general in the book, but especially so in terms of the way that they were in their kind of fake relationship. And as I mentioned last time, where it wasn't just like close proximity and forced proximity to like lingering touches, although there was some of that where like, you know, they feel sparks, but it was actually because like they were trying to prove themselves as being this is real because I want to pull one over on the other person to get the information that I need or to find out if she's a crimson moth. Like because they were trying to fool the other person, they were forced to be vulnerable to at least like really play into it to some extent, and that vulnerability led to the progressions in the relationship more so than anything else. And I really appreciated that element of the relationship building. I have heard people describe this as being like not like other romantasies in regards to the relationship, and I think that has to do with the potential obstacles to overcome here. I think I said that in either when I was first introducing it or in my last clip. I think maybe when I was introducing it. It's not important, but in the witch hunter setup, it's not one that I typically go for because I feel like there's a really big obstacle for them to overcome, and I agree with that here. I'm still sold on it. I still would really like this to go a certain way, and I'm definitely going to be reading the next book. I don't know if this is supposed to be a duology or a larger series. I know that Rebel Witch is like coming out right now-ish, but there's definitely some pretty significant obstacles to go overcome in the grand scheme of things. So I'll leave it there. Really liked it, actually. Surprised. Really enjoyed it. So I'm happy that I read it. I think I gave it a 4.5, and on Goodreads I just gave it a 5-star. So Huge win. The next book that I picked up was To Poison a King by S.G. Prince. I'm about 50% of the way into this. And this one is the one that was specifically recommended to me by Maria, from Maria Might Read That, with the comparison that it made her think of Daughter of the Forest, which is one of my favorite, not one of, it's my favorite book of all time. And I'll say that comparison is actually pretty accurate. Like, Maria was bang on with that. I can completely see why she made that comparison. It is not in the structure or the story or plot or like synopsis in any way is not similar. That one is a Swan Brothers retelling. And in this book, we are following a healer, and particularly a healer in a line of healers. And her mother, when she's still quite young, ropes her into trying to kill the king through poison. And when it doesn't work, her mother flees. And she is now in the situation of caring for the person who she tried to kill. So again, like this synopsis, this setup is not similar to Daughter of the Forest. However, it is really, really similar, and like the overall feel and tone of the story, both in like the almost like folklore element of it, but also the start does a really good job of like setting the scene of this girl who's a little bit isolated, and like doesn't really like in again the same way that like the beginning of Daughter of the Forest is like one of the best intros to a book ever. And I don't mean like a one-liner. It's that it pulls you in and it builds this life around the main character. Her mother is beautiful and charming, and part of her magic is just like convincing people that they're okay, and they get better. Whereas our main character is, I don't think that they describe her physically as, if they did, I skimmed over it, but like just like a little bit more plain. She's not charming. She's very more so shy. She doesn't really know how to interact with people as well. Her magic is more in like herbal magic and making potions and like concoctions and medicines and tinctures and like that is where she shines. And so she's, despite the royal position sort of that her mom carries in court, she herself is quite the outcast. And this is really, really heightened in the situation that she finds herself in when she's like 14 at the start of this book. Her mom has her poison the king instead of giving him medicine. She like slips in a poison with it as well, and it doesn't work. And her mom and dad abandon her to take off because they don't want, to be found out, and they just basically like sacrifice her to the potential of being caught. So after she is like, so while she's grappling with the fact that her parents have just like A, abandoned her, and B, abandoned her to be potentially caught out as the poisoner of the king, she now also has to care for the person that she poisoned in a really stressful period of time in like both her life and the king's life. There is a 9-year age gap between them. So at the beginning, she's 14, he's 23. So like nothing is romantic at the beginning. Although people who really, really care about the ages of things might be bothered, it's no worse than it is in Daughter of the Forest, let's say. And it is a really just very quiet and somewhat cozy tone of the two of them kind of figuring out how to interact with each other and to lean on each other and work through the king's feelings about his change in position and his change in his abilities. I will say that the romance has progressed a lot further. They're not still 14 and 23, like time passes. And not necessarily, like, nothing happens, but I would say that the feelings are more obvious in the growth of them, and like the changing circumstances, the way that they see each other has shifted more so at this percentage in the book than I would have thought. So which makes me like kind of curious about where we're gonna go with the conflict. Like, again, because I would have expected almost a slower burn, or at least Daughter of the Forest was a slower burn in terms of acknowledging feelings and things like that. Whereas this feels quite at the point that we're at now, halfway through. It feels like very clear that there's been a shift in how the two of each other, like how the two of them see each other. That might make some people comfortable with the age difference in terms of like where she is on the line of 20. I feel like post 20 people get a lot more lenient. I think they said age of majority is 17 in this world, if you care about that. In particular, nothing physical has happened. Nothing physical has happened at this point. I don't feel uncomfortable with the age, but that's a personal thing. Yeah, I don't know if I'm doing a good job, but I am enjoying this. It is, as I said, like in tone, it is very similar to Daughter of the Forest. Not as sad, although obviously some very like distressing things. I am really, really stressed about the situation with the poison, and that like when we're going to deal with that situation and the realities of that. So I'm stressed about it, but it is like really, really not cozy, but it has that quiet day-to-day kind of type quality. The one thing that I will say is that when you read something that really, really reminds you of something else, but isn't quite living up to that other thing, it always makes me want to read that other thing. So the whole time that I've been reading this, because it is so similar in tone, and there's been like a little, like I said, like an homage almost to that other book with certain things. Like there's like a blue dress, and if you know Daughter of the Forest, there's a very particular blue dress in that book that like plays a particular role, and just the blue dress, the way that it made our main character feel, and the way that it was viewed, felt very like, we see you, Daughter of the Forest fans. Right there with you. Like that's the feeling that I'm getting from the author, that she's like nodding to all of us Juliet Marillier fans. So it's making me want to read Daughter of the Forest. And to be fair, it's been a couple years. It's been 4 or 5 years now. Actually, I'm due for a reread. I'm due for a reread. So I'm potentially going to put that in the book sometime soon.
I finished To Poison a King, and while I would still say that this was overall a win, I do feel a little bit more muted in my response to it compared to how I was feeling at the 50% mark when I last checked in, specifically in regards to like the way some similarities to Daughter of the Forest panned out. And not specifically in the way that the relationship went, more of like some side character elements that wound up feeling more like an unnecessary copy kind of inclusion and less homage that the blue dress felt like in the first half. So I just feel like that has like left a little bit of a sour note on what was otherwise a really, really lovely romantasy. It is definitely not like a lot of the romantasy that I think is really popular and successful right now, like the more SJM style of romantasy. This is not that. This is definitely more the Daughter of the Forest kind of style of romantasy. So I think that there's some distinctions there. You could also put this like within like the Grace Raven, I guess, kind of, not Grace Raven, Grace Draven style of romantasy that is like a little bit more like subtle and nice and not dramatic, while this did have some drama. I wound up giving it a 4.25, so again, like I still felt really positive about it, but I feel like at a certain point I thought this was going to be a lot more of a hit than how I wound up feeling. I think it's also significant to note, sort of in terms of like my overall feeling of the success of this book, is that it is actually a very short book, especially in comparison to Daughter of the Forest. And I think that it's a necessary comparison, because I think that the author tried to do some similar things, but didn't
take the page time in the same way that JM did in Daughter of the Forest. So then the result, while very obviously similar, was not as successful or effective because it didn't have the build up that that Daughter of the Forest did. There was particularly a storyline, a side character storyline that was included that I don't think did anything for this story. Like for this story, it didn't add to it at all. So it feels like the side character, who again, like I don't think it was an effectively introduced best friend, period, or just like friend. Like there wasn't really the time put to it. The friend was just sort of like brought in every now and then as being like, look, she made a friend, and then filtered away. So there wasn't actually that, like, there wasn't a lot of time spent on the rapport building between those two. But this little like thing that happens sort of like brings in a side character. We introduce an idea, and then something almost immediately happens to kind of close off that little storyline, and it's extremely reminiscent. It is very, 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 very similar to something that happens in Daughter of the Forest, but just like in, out, done, over. We don't even really linger on the feelings that it causes, or like that are resulted there, like with our main character. So it felt totally unnecessary to have included it whatsoever. So then why was it there? You know what I mean? Like it just felt like copying. It just felt like copying. There were also some things that I think that let me down in the second half of the book in regards to the bad guy here. And the motivations of the bad guy, they are sort of explained, and there was an element there that like I did see coming in terms of why the baddie was doing the baddie things, but it didn't do a good job of really explaining how the baddie could feel the way that they felt. It did offer an explanation, but it was so quick of an explanation, and not one that we had kind of brought it up as like a one-liner in the first half, and then in the second half we introduced it as a one-liner again to be like, well, this happened to her when she was young, and so she feels this way. And it wasn't enough to be a good motivating factor behind that, behind what was happening. So it felt unnecessary and not at all enough. I think that I felt that way a little bit, or a lot actually, in the second half of the book, where I feel like we just tried to, we didn't have the page time to like really, really get full explanation and full feeling and full impact on what was happening. But overall, like I did ultimately like this book. I did really enjoy it. I just really, there were a few things like this in the second half of the book where I was like, that wasn't enough time, that wasn't enough explanation, that we didn't linger in these feelings nearly enough. We didn't have a good page time dedicated to some explanations that were required, and not in terms of like understanding, it's just like they're just like given to you explanations, and I would have liked them to be like more developed explanations in the way that they were rolled out. So ultimately, while I did really enjoy it, I kind of wound up with more of a sour taste in my mouth and a little bit more disappointed than how gooey and excited I was feeling at the 50% mark. There are, I think, more books planned in this world that are separate from this particular story, or at least like are not direct sequels anyway. Perhaps they're more like companions and just more stories set within this world. So I would read more from this author to see how those go. But since I finished the book, I get to have more Festivalsbala. And actually my partner hasn't had any yet this season. So we decided we're gonna go on like a little family excursion this weekend to try out a couple. So we'll do that. But it's actually like the last weekend that Festivalsbala are gonna be around. So I don't think that I'm gonna get another one when I finish Quicksilver. So this will be it, alas, for my Festivalsbala adventure. And one more Romantasy to try. Okay, we're in Carlsberg Boon. We're gonna go on a little pastry hunt, see if we can get ourselves some Festivalsbala. So last and possibly least is Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. This is the last book I'm reading for this project Romantasy vlog. And so far it's not looking so good. I'm about 50% of the way into it here, and there's just like quite a few things that I'm not vibing with. I am overall just like really sick of 1,000-year plus, like this one is like almost 2,000-year age gaps. Not necessary. I'm really sick of like primal fae who for some reason we feel the need to make like super kind of animalistic instead of just other. We make them like primal. I'm on that note, I'm so sick of like male female, because it's not enough to just be like, oh actually they like use the term male. It's that we have to include it in like every sentence. They like we're the epitome of maleness. I think what you're trying to say is masculine. You know, like you can still use masculine and not maleness. Like how does this human girl who has never experienced fae before suddenly like her vocab, everything is like male this, male that, ooh, what a male, blah blah blah, male. You know, like I'm so over it. I'm really sick to death of love interests who can scent arousal. Like why do we need that in books? In this specific book, it's weirdly being used as like the main form of flirting. It's not really flirting, but it's the thing that initiates conversations about that stuff. Let me check my notes. There's a whole list of things I'm really annoyed with. And quippy banter was the last one, where it's like not good banter, it's not good, effective, you know, witty dialogue. It's just like, ooh, no, you're the meanest. Ooh, you think you're so cool. Like it's just bad quippy banter. I'm really over. So those are some things that I'm experiencing in this book that are things at large, is things that I'm finding myself more and more annoyed with, and why I feel like Romantasy, when I think about it, doesn't work for me, because I feel like I'm associating it with these things, and this particular book has a lot of them. We are following our main character, Saris, who is a, you know, mid to late 20-year-old girl who's, of course, being drawn to this 18 plus 100-year-old guy. I'm getting ahead of myself. Saris is a human who lives in this desert-like city. There's 2 suns and like no water and a horrible queen and all of her guardsmen. And Saris winds up getting caught stealing like a lot of metal, because metal is particularly rare where she is. Like while she's being tortured to death, she keeps getting called to this like one corner of this room that's really eerie, and there's a sword involved. And she winds up opening up a portal to this other world, and this fae guy who for some reason she keeps calling Death, like she's in the process of dying, so I guess she like associates him with death in some way. He comes and takes her off to this other realm where it's like endless winter. It is in fact the winter court. I am finding the tension that is being built between Saris and this Kingfisher guy really, on top of all the things that I've already said, where it's like all this male stuff. She just like arbitrarily hates him. He's kind of like super rude and mean to her a lot of the time. It's one where he immediately starts using this nickname for her, and she's like, please stop. And he's like, no, I'm gonna call you this name because you're a worthless human who, you know, flashes and then is gone. And she like, she's not even just like once or twice that she asks him to please call her by her own name, like it's several times, and says like, this makes me uncomfortable, please stop using this nickname. So it's not, I'm sure it's gonna be, you know, meaningful down the line, but it just doesn't scream cozy, not cozy, it doesn't scream consent and mutual respect in any way, shape, or form. I don't like the angry banter, but yet still he's so handsome. He's the most handsome girl or guy, male that she's ever seen. Sorry, I know it's annoying. Yeah, so there's just a lot of it that I'm not really vibing with. We're really focusing on the tension between her and Kingfisher, even though what tension? I don't feel like there is earned tension here between the two. They're just like arbitrarily angry and upset with each other. There's maybe been like one slight hint at a mating bond, but I wouldn't say that the signs and the suggestions of a mating bond happening, like they're not uber there. They're not like hitting me over the head with it just yet, but I would anticipate that that is what is coming from this situation. Everything is just a little bit sloppy in the way that we're being introduced to things, and with this like fake angry tension between our main character Saris and Kingfisher. Yeah, so overall, like, I don't have really high hopes on this one, but at this point in the vlog, like, the other ones have been, like, Heartless Hunter was a huge success, and To Poison a King was a pretty good success. So 2 out of 3 is not bad if the second half of this book, like, continues on in this path or even gets worse. Then yeah, I'm coming out ahead on this vlog, I think, no matter what at this point. But I would be really disappointed to overall not like this story. I finished Quicksilver, and let me tell you, I am a little bit surprised how I feel. And that is that I actually kind of enjoyed it. Definitely not the feeling that I was feeling at the 50% mark, and nothing vastly improved in terms of like all the things that I was talking about were still present. Although maybe the quippy banter is what eased off a little bit, and the relationship between the two became more tender, or at least there were more tender moments while they were sort of like, yeah, there's something here, and then obviously you learn things that you're like, okay, that's why he was acting that way, and it's, you know, it's how you, it's why you think he would have been acting that way. It doesn't negate how just annoying he was. No. Was there a lot of like internal head of like, oh, I genuinely hate this guy, he's being so rude, but like I just can't help but feel drawn to him? Yes, there was a lot of that, and it was unearned because up until that moment she had not acknowledged being drawn to him, and suddenly it was all she could think about. So that was definitely annoying. I think that the, I guess, world elements, again, like I'm not saying it was executed very well, but there was some interesting world stuff that got added in here at a certain point, including like vampires and witches and gods and the interference of gods. And were the villains like just over the top, like evil for the sake of evil? Yes. And I am generally like largely annoyed with that in books, which makes me think, because there's not, like, I'm saying these things and I'm like, this isn't that different than like the Lady of Darkness series or whatever, that I was like, this is just so, I can't. No, there was other reasons that I was feeling upset about that series. But I genuinely believe with some of this romantasy stuff, where a lot of it is really samey, I think it's just going to be like a little bit of a roll of the dice of when you pick it up, what you're in the mood for, and which ones you're going to be like, yeah, this is annoying and this is stupid, but like it's working for me right now. Like I think it's genuinely a little bit of a roll of the dice of whether or not it's going to work for you or not, because stuff like this, which is really, really samey to a lot of the things that are happening in romantasy that are similar to, let's say, our archetypal representations of what I think current romantasy is sort of like based on in terms of like a certain author and their backlog. I think a lot of like the current romantasy genre is based on that archetype of series. So like I said, I think it's just a matter of whether or not, like, if you are in the right mood for it, and if the way in which that author has happened to have put all of those same elements together works for you in that particular moment. Like, I'm not like, what's that word? I don't have high critical praise for Quicksilver. I just had fun with the last half of it. Okay, so I don't know, like there's no profound reason as to why this worked for me so well and why other examples of this have not. And there's undoubtedly some things that I find annoying about this, some things that happened way too quickly. The friendships, so she would like meet people and be like, well, they're my friend now, and you're like, oh, are they? Okay, that was fast. You're putting all of your effort into saving your friend and the world problems that they have, and we're just kind of ignoring all of the other people that you've spent your life up until this point and all the problems that are related to them. Sure, okay, it's really important that you take on the plight of your friends, this group of friends that you have. So there's that. Like, I have critiques for this for sure, but I had fun. So actually, each of these books were in their own way a little bit of a win. I think Heartless Hunter was the one that was like, actually, like, I really, really liked this. I had a good time with this, and I had fewer critiques overall, I would say, about that one. Whereas Quicksilver, I think, was a really, really rough start, and I think has a lot of like, I'm over these, checklist of things, and it just happened to work out. Whereas then To Poison a King has that like, some of this stuff wasn't necessary to include and feels less honorary and more just like, why is this there? I just have to decline a call. Very, very surprised that each of these 3 books that I was skeptical about, and with this genre that I am largely have not up until this point been succeeding in, very surprised that all 3 of them were in their own ways successes. Huge success overall with this project vlog. I'm definitely going to have to do this again, particularly with Romantasy. I might give myself a little bit of a break though, because I do have some other Romantasy books like on my TBR in general. So I do have to like read those ones for specific requirements that I have, whether that's continuing on in a series or they happen to be a priority read, a 25 book to read in 2025 on that list. So I do have some other Romantasy things that I need to keep taking away at, but I'm going to narrow down another list and pick another 3 Romantasy books that I'm skeptical about. If you have any ideas or suggestions on what those 3 books should be, put them in the comments down below. I'm very curious to hear if you predicted that I would feel this way, or if you are disappointed or happy about how any of these books went for me. Let me know in the comments down below. Festival season is over, unfortunately, so I won't be able to go out and celebrate with another Festival Bala for Quicksilver, but fortunately I doubled up on that last one because I had a feeling that I wasn't going to make it in time for the season to end. So I will just have to satisfy myself with an everyday, amazing, delicious Copenhagen pastry of some other sort, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.